Hey there! I, Zak Wolf, have gotten a few older Mac laptops some time back from my little collection of vintage Macs, at least models made in the last couple of decades. I was able to get these from the electronics recycling and reselling company I work for as their computer technician. Yeah, some you may know, IT work has become a specialty of mine, and it's why I went for that computer information degree at my college and have since been working as a computer techie at that company for a year now. Time sure flies when you keep busy. Now, before you ask, no, I didn't steal them, so to speak. My boss and his assistant consider me the Apple expert on the job and know my interest in older Macs. And when they get lots of a certain model in bulk, or one that's too old they don't want to resell online, and just plain recycle, they can let me have one. I will explain why with each of these machines. First up, my Apple PowerBook G4, the 15-inch aluminum model. This one was made in early 2005. And this is the first older Mac I got from the company, as they don't bother to resell the older PowerPC Macs due to Apple having considered them obsolete for several years now, having transitioned to the Intel processors in 2006, not unlike their current transition from Intel to their own faster and more powerful ARM-based silicon systems, like more beefed up versions of the silicon chips used in most of their iOS devices. Also, when I got this PowerBook G4, it did need a bit of restoration work. Not cosmetically, so to speak, as these things are often built like brick houses, if you pardon the expression. But it came without an internal hard drive or even an IDE cable to connect the drive to the motherboard, or as Apple calls them, the logic board. And it also only came with 512 megabytes of system RAM. So I got an M-SATA solid-state drive and the appropriate adapter for it, and also ordered a replacement IDE cable and 2 gigabytes of RAM to max it out. And once I put them in, I slid a macOS 10.4 Tiger installation disk into the slot-loaded combo drive here. As for G4 Macs, Tiger is often a better, faster operating system. Plus, on these PowerPC Macs, with Tiger, I can also use the classic mode to run older macOS 9 and earlier applications, such as several computer games from my childhood that came in Mac versions. As being from the 1990s, they won't work on any macOS 10 versions. It can't natively boot into macOS 9 the way my PowerMac G4 Quicksilver Tower or 2001 can. As in 2002, Apple officially dropped support for macOS 9, complete with Steve Jobs holding a mock funeral for it, placing the little macOS 9 retail box to a large coffin. I can't believe it's been over 10 years now since Steve Jobs himself died. But for running macOS 9 on this PowerBook G4, Classic is just fine, as macOS 10 Tiger was the last version to include the Classic feature, being the last version of macOS 10 to come out while Apple is only still making PowerPC Macs. Anyway, let me boot this baby up for you. Okay, let me turn it on. Yeah, on the old PowerPC Macs, how the screen stays black as it does the chime. See if I can make it a little closer. Yeah, I've got a USB mouse hooked up there because these paws are not really designed for using Mac laptop trackpads. And this is an older one. The trackpad has a single button here. Back then, like if you wanted to right click on them, like you had to hold down the control key and then click at the same time. A little inconvenient, but it worked for many people. Of course, this mouse has 2 buttons, so I can configure it if need be to do a right click. But yeah, this is the macOS 10.4 Tiger. It introduced the dashboard, as seen here. It's got the old versions of iTunes, iPhoto, and iMovie. And I can also run the Adobe Premiere 6.5 on this baby too. As that was initially the last Mac-compatible version of Premiere before it became Premiere Pro. And it was Windows only from 2003 to 2007. Yeah, the old spinning beach ball of doom. Now, that was a lot more common on the PowerPC Macs, I will admit. Yeah, you may recall I demonstrated this before in the PowerBook G4s. And speaking of older software, look at that, I can run the living books on it, the native versions. No scum VM required. The office. Yeah.
Early in the morning, Mom wakes me and says, "Get up, little monster." It's time for school.
Yep, and the click points work too, like. I thought that was funny. Pretty neat, huh? I can even edit standard definition video on it pretty well. High definition video works too. Like when I used this Canon Vixia HV40 camcorder I showed you months ago. But it takes longer to capture and edit due to the somewhat slower G4 processor at a time. Even when using iMovie HD for 2006, the HDV capture is not in real time, often running at a quarter the speed, so it gets kinda tricky, but is doable. The early Intel Core Duo Macs also tended to have the same issue, as you need a really souped up system for real-time HDV capture. As I said, iMovie HD is great for running on G4 Macs. And speaking of older apps, it also helps I have this copy of Microsoft Office 2004 for Macs kicking around. It was designed to only run on PowerPC Macs. To run it on an early Intel Macs, you need to make sure you had Rosetta installed. In case you don't know, the original Rosetta was a PowerPC emulation layer that came on the Intel version of Mac OS X Tiger, Leopard, and Snow Leopard. Back when Apple initially made the switch from PowerPC to Intel, and you wanted to run Mac software that wasn't Intel native yet, i.e. their universal binaries. In fact, on Mac OS 11 Big Sur and Mac OS 12 Monterey, the Rosetta name was revived for use on their newest Macs, using Apple's own ARM base, such as the M1 series, like the M1 MacBook Air I use a lot, and I've shown you before. Heck, not all the Adobe Creative Cloud suite's universal yet, as for quite a while Adobe Premiere Pro had been Intel only still, but thanks to Rosetta 2, I was able to run it on my M1 MacBook Air without a lot of hassle, and Adobe has been gradually updating the Creative Suite to be Apple Silicon native, including Premiere Pro a while back. Likewise, the Mac version of Cyberlink Power Director is currently Intel only, but can work on M1 Macs thanks to Rosetta 2. And it's obvious Cyberlink came out with that due to how their iOS version of Power Director was doing so well. And Apple announced the M1 Macs you could run iOS apps natively on them. And rather than just let Mac users install the more limited iOS version of Power Director, they developed a Mac version that's very similar to their very popular Windows version of Power Director. It offers maybe 75 or 80% of the same features. But speaking of Intel Macs, let's move on to my other older Mac laptop I obtained. A mid-2012 unibody 15-inch MacBook Pro. A brief little story on how I got this. Previously, I had gotten a mid-2012 unibody 13-inch MacBook Pro from the warehouse, but after a while the display began to fail. So he decided to just label that one as no good and sell it on the company's eBay stores for parts, as some people will indeed buy them that way. So I transplanted the memory and SSD I installed of it into this 15-inch MacBook Pro that we had gotten in a lot of computers from the Newmark headquarters in Rhode Island. Yep, the same Newmark that made my current record player there. A PT01 Scratch. Now this model came out at the time Apple also introduced their first Retina display MacBook Pros. And thus, this was one of the last models to include features like an optical disk drive and user-replaceable RAM. It was also one of the final Mac laptops to have Ethernet and FireWire ports built in. As by this time, Thunderbolt was the next big thing from Apple. And Apple had come out with Ethernet and FireWire to Thunderbolt adapters as part of this. Or the new Retina MacBook Pro subsequent models. Like this FireWire adapter here I've shown you. Thunderbolt's pretty amazing, as I mentioned before. And this 15-inch MacBook Pro here has a single Thunderbolt port. Or if you want to output video to an external monitor or projector, or work with Thunderbolt hard drives and interfaces, as you can daisy-chain Thunderbolt. There are even some new video cameras with direct Thunderbolt connections instead of USB or FireWire. Now you may recall I already have an Intel Mac laptop, that late 2009 unibody polycarbonate MacBook, but I really only got that back in 2017 so I could have a working MacBook for use at my college campus and such. The 2012 unibody MacBook Pro here has clear advantages. Besides the bigger screen, it's got a 720p FaceTime HD camera that's a slightly better resolution than the old iSight webcam was, along with the aforementioned Thunderbolt and FireWire ports, and USB 3 ports and an SD card slot. I have more USB 3 devices now, so it's pretty handy, as it does operate at over like 10 times the speed of USB 2.0 did, 5 gigabits per second, compared to the 480 megabits of USB 2. But even with that, Thunderbolt still blew it out of the water at a whopping 10 gigabits per second. And then the Thunderbolt 3 and USB-C standards on my M1 MacBook Air are even faster, reaching up to 40 gigabits per second. Though they do require more adapters, I don't mind too much, as I already have this nice fall lengthy USB-C hub I've shown you. Pretty versatile there. And I also have this LaCie 4TB USB-C external hard drive to use with the Air. And with this hard drive, it also came with a USB-C to USB-A cable, so I can connect it to the 2012 MacBook Pro and have it operate via USB 3 standards. And anyways, this MacBook Pro is a quad-core Intel i7 processor. Runs at 2.6 gigahertz, with turbo boost up to 3.6 gigahertz. And it's even faster than my quad-core i7 Mac Mini desktop we've talked about here. And this MacBook Pro even has a discrete graphics card, an NVIDIA GeForce GT650M with a gigabyte of dedicated video RAM. That can be really useful for video work. In fact, this model has 2 GPUs. Besides the aforementioned NVIDIA one, it also has an integrated Intel HD Graphics 400 chip that shares system RAM, largely for when you're using the MacBook Pro on battery power or doing things that aren't really graphic intensive, like light web browsing or typing documents on instant messaging and the like. And when I got this, it had 8 gigabits of system RAM installed, the amount it comes with by default, along with no internal hard drive. I had ordered 2 8GB RAM modules to max out my 13-inch MacBook Pro to 60 gigabytes to increase the performance. And so I moved the RAM modules into the 15-inch Pro here. And because these older unibody MacBook Pros have a very user-service-friendly modular interior design, I had 2 different solid-state drives I could alternate using with the Pro. But besides that, this one, I was even able to install macOS 12 Monterey on it. And while it's unsupported by this model, I was able to get it to work thanks to a third-party hack. And it's what I also use on my M1 MacBook Air, but it's fully supported on that. Thankfully, using Monterey, I can run latest versions of software like Microsoft Office for Mac, the Adobe Creative Suite, iMovie, and Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro. And I can also run a Windows virtual machine via VMware Fusion. In fact, on this, check it out, Boot Camp. I can run Windows 10 on this MacBook Pro natively. The full graphics support and everything. So this really has me covered. I can run Picasso on this, which is basically like Google's version of Apple's Photos for Mac. They discontinued it now, but it's good to use on Windows. And how I've got the menu bar, the old start menu, and of course I've also got this.
This is a test for Steve here.
Yeah, so you can still do stuff with Drew Pickles and his gay gang if need be. Yes, I may have said Boot Camp is a feature that only works on Intel Macs for obvious reasons. I remember my quad-core i7 Mac Mini, I used to have a Boot Camp partition with Windows 10 on it. Because as you may know, I still like to be cross-platform. It's a good skill to have when you work as a computer technician. Plus, Speakonia only works on Windows, and I still need that if I ever do anything with Drew Pickles and whatnot. Like I used with the Microsoft 3D Movie Maker, of course. But I eventually removed it from the Mac Mini, as later in 2018 I got a real Windows PC to run alongside my Mac Mini, a Dell Optiplex 9010 Mini Tower, so I can natively run Windows and the Mac OS side by side. And of course, the Mac OS is compatible with many of the same file extensions popular with Windows, such as JPEG, PDF, MP3, WAV, Microsoft Word documents, the list goes on. But enough Windows talk. Early this week, I managed to get another 2012 MacBook Pro for my collection. This time, a working 13-inch model. It's very similar to the 15-inch MacBook Pro I showed you. But aside from the 13-inch display, it has a dual-core i7 processor instead of quad-core, and it has the integrated Intel Graphics 400 chip. But for this one, I put an SSD containing macOS 10.11 El Capitan on it. This is so I can run several older 32-bit applications, even some of the same ones I can run on the PowerBook G4, like iPhoto, iMovie HD, and Final Cut Express, and several other applications still work in El Capitan for the time being, like Firefox and Google Chrome. Heck, I could even use the setup for making those wrapper offline animations, and for making some Let's Play videos. So that glitch I mentioned on macOS Catalina and higher, where the ScreenFlow will not record the sound from ScumVM. Using Capto on my M1 MacBook Air, I can record sound off ScumVM when recording the video. So at least I can do it on my MacBook Air. But currently, ScreenFlow and Capto can't currently record the sound off virtual machines made on UTM on the Apple Silicon Macs, like my MacBook Air. So I can use the Pros for that, or my Mac Mini. When capturing HDV footage to iMovie or Final Cut Express on the MacBook Pros here, the capture process happens in real time too, thanks to the faster 2.9 GHz dual-core i7 processor on this model and the 60 GB of system RAM on both. Of course, I can also capture HDV footage in real time when I use the current iMovie, Final Cut Pro, or QuickTime on my 15-inch unibody MacBook Pro drive, or my 2012 Mac Mini, or even the M1 MacBook Air, with the appropriate adapters, of course. Also, since this 13-inch MacBook Pro is a working built-in Super Drive, along with iDVD and Adobe Encore being installed, it also makes for a great DVD creation device. Of course, I could also burn DVDs using my M1 MacBook Air or i7 Mac Mini with this external Blu-ray burner, meaning I could offer Blu-rays as well. And the 15-inch MacBook Pro has a working Super Drive as well. But even so, This 2012 quad-core i7 MacBook Pro definitely makes for a great secondary laptop for me to use, for the purposes I mentioned, including, of course, if I want to run Windows. And the fact that I can run the latest macOS version on this makes it even better. But I guess that's enough of showing these off. Just keep watching this YouTube channel to see whatever I do next.